What's going on, everybody? Welcome into our members only Q&A, special Thursday edition of the members only Q&A. Usually does not take place on Thursday, but appreciate you guys joining me today. Sorry for being about 1 minute late. Just wanted to make sure I reset the router and did everything beforehand. I know there's been a little bit of glitchiness the last couple live shows, so wanted to try to make sure to take care of that if I could. I checked my speeds right before coming on. I'm at 650 megabits download, and it's even higher upload right now. So I have as good a speeds as you could possibly have. So hopefully no issues. This is obviously a really fun time of year where there's a lot going on. You have cuts and trades and free agency starting next Monday. It's everything you want this time of year. It's a perfect precursor to the start of baseball season and March Madness. It's a beautiful time of year. You've got the NBA regular season winding down. You've got the NFL offseason completely ramping up. The draft just right around the corner. Again, March Madness, baseball season started, hockey season, trade deadlines coming around for them, I believe, as well. So it's a great time to be a sports fan. I love March. You get spring, you get Shamrock Shakes, you get Girl Scout cookies, you get the spring forward. I know you lose an hour, but the timing's just better when it's the 1 hour later. So everything's looking good from that side of things. I know there's a lot going on in the world. We won't get into all of that, but hopefully we can take an hour here, distract ourselves from anything that we have going on, and just talk some Green Bay Packers football. For those of you who are here live, thank you so much for being members. Appreciate you guys a ton. For those of you who are here afterwards, if you are not members yet, make sure to check those out as soon as you have a chance so you can come live and chat with us every single week on our members only Q&As. Let's get to questions right away. I should have about an hour or so. That should give us plenty of time to get to everyone's questions, but we'll do my absolute best here. Andrew's coming in hot. Hello, Andy. A couple of questions on the NFLPA grades. How many players per team respond? Equal amount on each side of the ball. I know we will not know the names, but do we have the time with the Packers or NFL tenure for those who do respond to the survey? That would add some context to the data. If the head coach rating is in relation to his personality, his football acumen, not sure what to make of the respect part of that either. This was better when the NFLPA could release these. At least they had some good explanations of what was being asked and graded instead of them just getting the letter grade. Thanks for the great content. Yeah, don't have any of that. I think it was average of about 50 players per team. Maybe it was a little bit less than that responded. But I think what I would look at here is, we don't know all of the context. It's impossible to know. I'm sure the teams would love to know as well. But what we do know is that they took a major step back in the grades from a year ago. It's primarily the same team with a couple different players here and there. And the sentiment was not the same as a year ago. Now, maybe a couple different players did it this year than that did it last year. Who knows? But it was still a pretty significant step backwards. And we know that in general, every other team has the same set of circumstances where they don't know the players. It's a random selection. We don't know if it's offense or defense, etc. So you're in the same boat. You're in the same boat as every other franchise. You're in the same boat as you were a year ago, and the grades were given a year ago, and the year before that, and the year before that. And this year, Green Bay graded much worse. So I do think overall, it's not the be all end all. You have to take some grain of salt with it, but it's tough to look at it and spin it in any sort of positive way for sure. And it's tough to look at it and not say, all right, there's some smoke here. How much fire there is, if they can't put it out, we don't know any of that at this point. Maybe it's minor. Maybe it's just, quick, stomp on it. Everything's good. As soon as next season starts, everything's going to be good to go. Or maybe there's something festering there. We don't know, but this isn't a great indicator. If you're looking for signs, if you're looking for, hey, how is the status of the team internally? This one's not a good one to look at. So take it for what it's worth. We don't have all the details. We don't have all the information, but it's still a major step back from where it was a year ago with basically a lot of the same players. And it's still worse than what, the majority of the rest of the NFL was graded as. So I think we have to take that under consideration. I think it's a real, red flag, pink flag to some extent. How much, you want to put stock into that, your mileage may vary, but I definitely think it's something that does not look great upon the organization at the moment. Those are just a few questions you had after listening to the show this morning. Appreciate you, Andrew, and thank you so much for giving that a check, or for checking it out, I should say. Most hated Chicagoan, good to see you. Andy, welcome back. Matt doesn't talk to kickers, played a part in the respect grade. Harbaugh's grade was low because he can't relate to many of the young players. Matt's grade is his personality. A couple things. I still wholeheartedly believe that Matt said that in jest. I don't think there's any chance in which he did not talked to Brandon McManus or had not had conversations with Brandon McManus. He said it with a wry smile. I don't believe that to be the case at all. And even if it was, even if that's one player grading. So maybe Brandon McManus or Lucas Haversick were pissed that they didn't get more time with Matt. That's not going to be enough to tank the grades overall. So again, I think that was 100% said in jest. I don't think that was a real thing. Probably a joke that's not in great taste. What does it do for you? Nothing. But I don't think that was a serious anything. As far as, Matt's grade is his personality. And I think you go on to say here, Jair suspended in 2023, Romeo in 2024, Malik left home in 2025 when we're short on available wide receivers. Jacobs and Quay's comments during the season. Matt LaFleur will be coaching for his job in 2026, and that's fine. Players injured in a meaningless game and players being pushed to play when they are pushed to play when they are hurt or injured also may have factored into the respect grade and definitely the training staff grade. I'm glad this was leaked so you can have evidence and see why more and more fans wanted a coaching change. This all didn't happen this season. It's been building. 2026 will be an epic season. Go Pack Go. I think some of these are jumps to conclusion. I will say this. I think Green Bay was 1,000,000,000% right to suspend Jair in 2023. I think they were right to suspend Romeo in 2024. I think that they were right to release Malik Heath in 2025. I think they handled those as well as you could possibly want in those situations. Sometimes that's tough coaching, and those are things you have to do. In fact, I would be more upset if Matt didn't take those steps and didn't discipline players when they needed to be disciplined. I think that's holding the standard. Players may not like that, but I think that's more of a good thing than it is a bad thing. Quay's comments at the end of the season, I'm sure there's certainly a level of frustration there. Whatever it is, I think you don't want to jump to the conclusions of saying we know what they are. We don't know the exact things that led to some of the angst and frustration in the building, other than, again, the respect thing that we know. That's an issue. Like I said today, that's something Matt's going to have to improve upon and really get to the bottom of and figure out. But what led to that, why players are feeling that way, that's a bridge that we just don't know. We can't cross at this point because we don't have any concrete evidence as to exactly why that is. But it's still, and I don't think he's coaching. He's coaching for his job in 2026 if they have a catastrophic season. I don't think he's coaching for his job after getting a brand new contract if they have a similar season to what they did this last year. They just gave him a pretty big vote of confidence. I don't think it's like this, hey, get to the Super Bowl or win 2 playoff games or you're gone. I think it's a very similar situation he was in. If it's a catastrophic season, yeah, he could lose his job. Outside of that, I don't think he's coaching for his job this year. All right. Andy, hope your vacation went well with the family. It was awesome. Thank you so much. Cam Jordan is now available. Any interest in bringing him in? Reduced snap count, but seems like he has been productive. Probably not. First of all, you'd have to kind of figure out what his fit is in a 3-4. He has played it before, but I don't think you want him as a stand-up outside linebacker. You could kind of play him in that 3 technique role. It's not what you need right now. Carl Brooks can play that. Colby Wooden can play that. Devontae Wyatt can play that. You can kick some other guys there too. You kind of have the players that you need to play that position. He'd be fine, but he would not be somebody that I would prioritizing. He's getting older. If you were giving me an old defensive lineman, I would much rather have Calais Campbell than Cameron Jordan at this point in time. Were you surprised Goot didn't name O-line as one of the needs along with the secondary and inside linebacker? I take all of that with a pretty big grain of salt. The Rashawn Gary stuff, I mean, he's just up there slinging lies. He doesn't want to tell everyone else in the league that he is coveting offensive line and corner and linebacker. Or at least offensive line and maybe some of the other positions, right? He doesn't want to tip his hand. So I'm sure he'd love, as he said, competition at every position, but his actions will speak loudest. Whatever he said about Rashawn Gary or whatever he said about wanting certain players at certain positions, we're about to find out. We're going to find out very, very soon in free agency, in the draft, via trades, whatever, of exactly what he was searching for. When Goody identifies a problem, it's usually not some sort of minor fix. You can argue sometimes he's been slow at identifying the problem, but when he identifies safety, all of a sudden Adrian Amos and Darnell Savage are in one offseason, a first-round pick and a major free agent signing. Or later with safety, it's Xavier McKinney, Evan Williams, Javon Bullard, Kitano Adapo, Zane Anderson, all in one offseason, completely remaking the room. When they identify I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. Defensive end as a need. It's not just, we'll plug a player here. It's Zadarius Smith and Rashawn Gary and Preston Smith all in one off season. So when he identifies something like that, when he identifies tight end, it's Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave in the same draft. He's not afraid to put the resources towards it. So we're about to find out which position he thinks is in need of a makeover, if he feels like there is a position that needs it, and what he does to make over that position. In Ed Policy's column, he mentioned one of the reasons he wanted to keep LaFleur is because his relationship with the players. Is it concerning that his perception is so off base on the NFLPA survey? A couple things I would say. A, there's a possibility that Policy already had those grades when he made those comments. We are finding them out now, and the NFLPA may have put them together, who knows at what time, but there's a possibility that Policy already had some inclination or maybe even the full grades of what that looked like prior to mentioning that. Maybe he didn't, but we just don't know the timeline. The second thing I will say is there does seem to be a very large discrepancy with what was being said at locker room cleanout about Matt LaFleur and what the general perception is seemingly, or has been with Matt LaFleur, and now what's coming out in the NFLPA survey. There's a gap in there that we just don't have all the information. As I mentioned today, there were players, especially like Micah Parsons, amongst others, that went well above and beyond the call of duty to speak for Matt LaFleur and on his behalf and say how much they wanted him back. There is certainly a contingent of players on this team, which seems to be kind of the most important contingent of players that really like Matt and what he's doing. There seems to be another contingent that is not too happy with Matt and what he is doing. And that disconnect is something, again, Matt's going to have to get cleaned up. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe they can go out and have a great season, regardless of whether or not, they're a fan of Matt. Who knows? They have a very good roster and they've got a very good quarterback. And so maybe that stuff doesn't matter as much as it seems. But I have a feeling that the other thing I was going to say about policies too is I am sure that he did his due diligence and that he talked to leaders on the team. He talked to other coaches. He talked to people in, high positions to get a feel of what was going on. It sounded like he really did his due diligence to see how everything was going, to sit in meetings with Russ Ball and Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst. And it seemed like, he was very confident in that decision. Whether it was the right or wrong decision, time is going to tell. As I talked about today with the NFLPA grades, when you're usually getting a B- or worse, it doesn't get better. Almost every single one of those guys over the last few years who have got a B- grade or worse have been fired. The only ones that have not, the only ones prior to this year of the last 3 years have been Todd Bowles. That was the only one. Everyone else has since been fired or let go or mutual parting of ways, etc. And the only other two this year were Jim Harbaugh and Matt LaFleur. So we'll see. It's not a great group of coaches to be lumped in with when you get that sort of grade, but it's going to be very important for him that he again kind of wins that respect back. We'll see what that looks like, and again, a year from now, we'll see what the season brings this year. But again, there's smoke there. There's some issues, and they've got to get it cleaned up, figured out. But I do believe that policy probably did his due diligence, asked around, asked the key players, and it does seem like the key players are still pretty much on Team LaFleur. Tough to say from the outside looking in. Pack-a-Day Fanatic, like that name. Did you see the top 10 list comparing Ted's top 10 picks to Goot's top 10 picks? Wow, really makes you appreciate how good Ted was at drafting overall and made me feel a whole lot worse about Goot. Yeah, I did see that. I'm going to see if I can pull it up just so I can compare it. I just glanced at it briefly. See if they, here. All right, so Goody's top 10, and this is according to one Twitter handle. I'll just put it that way. Jordan Love, Jair Alexander, Elton Jenkins, Rashawn Gary, Zach Tom. Zach Tom should be higher, first and foremost. Tucker Kraft should probably be higher. But Christian Watson, Rasheed Walker, Romeo Dobbs, Quay Walker. Just want to see if this is missing anything. This doesn't have... that doesn't have Edgerrin Cooper on it. That doesn't have Evan Williams on it. Doesn't have Javon Bullard on it. Doesn't have Jaden Reed on it. I'm not saying all of those would be on it, but doesn't have Devontae Wyatt on it. That's probably, I would put probably Wyatt on it over Quay. Yeah, it's misleading because there are, I mean, I wouldn't have Quay on there. I probably wouldn't have Rashid on there. And I probably would have some other players that are better, like an Evan Williams, or like an Edgerrin Cooper and Evan Williams should be on there for sure. So it's a little bit misleading for Goody's top 10, which is not surprising based on the account that's posting it, which again, I will not name. Ted Thompson's top 10, Aaron Rodgers, Clay Matthews, Jordy Nelson, Devontae Adams, David Bakhtiari, Greg Jennings, Josh Sitton, Nick Collins, Corey Lindsley, TJ Lang. Clearly better for Ted. The other thing that I want to look at here, that also doesn't include, he doesn't have Kenny Clark on there either, who should probably be on there. The overall list here probably needs some work, and you probably need to do more than top 10, but Ted's is better. The other thing I wanted to look at here, Ted, let's see, what, 2005 to 2017. So what, 13 years? He had 13 years, and what, Goody was 2018, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. So he's at 8 years. So Ted has 5 more years of draft picks in that. So yeah, you add the next 5 years of Goody, of what he could potentially do with those draft picks. And again, include Edgerrin Cooper and Evan Williams, maybe Javon Bullard, some others in there. Matthew Golden's going to have time to progress. You're also getting finished products from Ted Thompson's list. You don't have finished products on Brian Gutekunst's list. So again, not all of the best players are on either of these lists, if we're being honest. Aaron Jones isn't listed on Ted Thompson's list either. So you probably need to expand it out to about 15, maybe even 20 players to get a better feel for it. And I do think, again, Thompson has 5 more years and completed actual products, whereas Matthew Golden might be one of the best players on this list. And we just don't know it yet because he's only had 1 year in the league. If you were doing it based on Jordy's first year in the league, Jordy wouldn't be on the list. So I don't think it's fair to compare them apples to apples right now. Yes, Ted's looks better, but I think there's reasons for that. And Goody's is still a pretty darn good list, including a franchise quarterback. So yeah, I don't think it's a fair calculation, which again, does not surprise me based on the account that posted it. All right, Pack-A-Day Fanatic. This felt like the first year. It felt like there was a championship level pressure on LaFleur since Rodgers left. Do you think his anxiety, stress poured over into the treatment of players? He is uptight. I actually didn't think he was quite as uptight, at least with the media this past year. I thought he's been more uptight with the media in years past. I do think he felt some pressure with not having that contract extension done going into the year. I do think there was probably some truth to that. How much of that poured over and whatever. Again, so much of what happens inside that building is really, really tough to tell from the outside looking in. Even somebody with access who can ask questions or attend little pieces of practice or training camp, it's just so hard to glean what actually happens behind closed doors. We just aren't privy to that stuff. And again, what I'll say is that's not to absolve anything. There's clearly an issue here, but what that is exactly, and again, why players are feeling that way, unless we get more info from the players, it's tough to tell right now. Appreciate you, John. It's good to be back. Good to be back chatting with you guys. Been thinking about going big on offensive line. I don't think it's a bad approach per se, but I have zero confidence in this coaching staff, front office to execute it well. Yeah, again, there's no perfect formula, right? But as I talked about with Aaron Nagler, and he and I were both in agreement, offensive line has to be the 1A thing that you really fix this offseason and make sure that it is playing at a much higher level, because it will fix so many ills with this team. So many ills. Your red zone offense, your short yardage situations, your overall offensive efficiency, Jordan Love, Josh Jacobs, your run game. And if you're putting up more points, it's going to make things easier for the defense and special teams too. So I think the offensive line is 1A on the list of things. And I think if you improve that in a significant way, everything else will kind of come along with it. It's a huge force multiplier. Had more confidence if we hired Stoutland or at least some outside coaching blood. The incestuousness of the offensive staff is a problem. Again, I don't just want to disagree on everything, but you just got a new wide receivers coach. I guess they didn't do that much on offense. You're probably right on that regard. I was thinking there was maybe a little bit more. Getsy was internal and has been with the team before. So I guess most of the coaching changes were on the defensive side, special teams, etc. They did get a lot of new coaches, but you're right, on the offensive side, it's just a new wide receivers coach. I don't think there's anybody else. But we have not heard the final coaching staff yet. Maybe there's a surprise or two in there. Jeff Stoutland is not, ended up anywhere yet. Maybe Green Bay can coerce him over still. But I will say my one of my biggest issues with this offseason so far, at least as far as we know, is that they didn't do anything with the offensive line coach. I can live with Steno as offensive coordinator. I can live with, a lot of the other offensive coaches. I didn't think that, what Butkus has done, at least again from the outside looking in, which is again sometimes tough, that he deserved to be back based on how that offensive line performed. So that would be one of the bigger issues that I have with this offseason so far. If a really good tackle prospect fell to 52, would you take him if he was? Oh, absolutely. If you did and he, Tom and Morgan all looked really good, what would you do? You figure out the rest later. First of all, I'll tell you right now in this draft class, a lot of the tackle prospects, some of them might have to kick into guard anyway. So you figure that out later, and you're going to need all those guys. You just can't get enough good offensive linemen. And the truth is Green Bay loves maneuvering those guys around anyway and loves having the versatility. We know Morgan can play a little bit inside, even if it's not his best position. We know Tom could play inside, even if that's not what you want to do. I just think you get, if you draft a great right tackle, you figure out the rest later. And so right now I would gladly take as many good offensive linemen as I could. And if BPA was an offensive tackle at 52, sure. No problem whatsoever. Like Chanel a lot. If the Packers play a 3-4, does he fit? He's primarily played Sam, but could he play Mike? Love to hear Justice Mosqueda's opinion on that too. I think Justice, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I know he was kind of either tweeting or wrote an article about it. I forget which one it was, of how, he thinks, I think Chanel would be more of a Sam. That is what Chanel has done more of. But I think in a 3-4, you could easily play Chanel and Cooper together and they'd be a really good fit. So I would have no issue with it. I think he can do it. But Green Bay would have to have that same level of confidence, and Chanel would have to go out and prove it if he was put in that position. But I actually think Chanel and Cooper make a very, very good dynamic duo next to each other. I would have no problem with that. What are your thoughts on Demario Davis as a Quay replacement? He might be willing to play on a cheap incentive-laden contract for a shot at a ring, $3 million 1 year, $7 million 2 year, maybe. I bet he goes a little bit more than that. I don't like old linebackers. I'm willing to go old at certain positions: offensive line, interior, defensive line, kicker, quarterback, certain tight ends, especially if they're the run blocking variety, safety. Sometimes there's some positions I'm okay with it. Linebacker's not one. Again, it might be the curse of, watching Hardy Nickerson try to chase Michael Vick, but you get old really fast at linebacker. I would probably not go in that direction. And I've been one of the biggest Demario Davis fans. He and Levante David have been two of my favorite linebackers in the league to watch over the last decade or so. Both phenomenal players, but linebackers get old fast. I'd say the same thing about Bobby Wagner. If I were going to go old, Wagner would maybe interest me a little bit more. But again, you get slow really, really fast at that position. Just saw the Bears got a 2 for more. Absolutely hate overpaid by Buffalo. I hate. Huge deal for the Bears. They got really, really good value on that, even though it's a late 2. They had to give up a 5th. So it's more like a 3, but it's still really great value for Chicago, and hate that they were able to get that pick, and just hope that they're not able to parlay it into Crosby or something like that, because that would be brutal if Crosby ended up on the Bears. Just trying to keep an eye on if there's any more news that has come out since I started, but doesn't look like it at this point. As far as spamming questions go, I would say, just be careful, everyone. If you're asking 8 questions, other people's in general are going to the back of the line. What I will say though is GB Gary. If I did feel like I wasn't going to be able to get to everyone's questions, I would limit, John's or somebody else's to just 1 or 2 in that situation, because today I feel like we're going to get to everyone's. I didn't mind, answering all of John's, but yeah, especially if it's a happy hour, try to just limit to, a couple questions if you can. Which of these centers would you be happiest to see the Packers sign? Biadasz at 11, Mays at 12, or Sean Ryan at 7? Can I say I would rather have McGovern or Linderbaum if I'm going to spend that type of money, if I'm being honest. If Linderbaum's 20, then I guess maybe not. But if McGovern's around like 14, I would say McGovern. If I had to choose between those, I don't like any of those numbers. I'm not Mays at 12 is the worst option. It would be between Biadasz at 11 and Ryan at 7. I'd probably do Ryan at 7, save the $4 million, and then, either bring in another player or try to draft somebody to give the competition to Sean Ryan. But I don't love any of those options at that price. Maybe Biotish at 11 is okay. I'd probably need to go back and watch him just a little bit closer, but I would really be taking a very close look at Connor McGovern. Not that it'll actually do anything because they won't sue the Packers or Georgia, but did you see Grambling State got a federal trademark on the G logo? I did not see that. That's really funny. Probably not great for Green Bay, but yeah, I did not see that. But how much money do they have to play with in free agency? Eric, right now, none. Right now, none. They restructured Xavier McKinney today, got max value on that. So they are under the cap now. And now it just depends. What do they do with Elton? What do they do with Rashawn? And what other restructures do they do? They can open up a pretty significant amount of money if they want to really kick the can down the road and, restructure some contracts with a lot of void years and release Rashawn Gary and Elton Jenkins, or release Elton and restructure Rashawn Gary. They can open up a pretty significant amount of money. How much that they're willing to do, that's where we're at right now, where we don't know the answer to it. And we'll know a lot more in the next week or so. What should they prioritize in free agency that is difficult to find in the draft? I'll just put it this way, Eric. What you always want to try to do is be ready to start a game with your roster before the draft takes place. You want to have a starting lineup in place. They're not far. They're not far off right now, right? Jordan Love at quarterback, Josh Jacobs at running back. They have plenty of wide receivers, Tucker Kraft at tight end, along with Luke Musgrave, etc. You're probably looking right now at some form of Jordan Morgan, Aaron Banks. For the moment, Elton Jenkins, but we would probably have to say Jacob Monk if we're being realistic. Then Anthony Belton and Zach Tom, LVN and Micah Parsons once he's healthy, Devontae Wyatt and Colby Wooden along the defensive line, Edgerrin Cooper and either Isaiah McDuffie or Tyron Hopper at linebacker, Nixon, Valentine, Hobbs, Bullard, corners, and then Williams and McKinney at safety. You've got a kicker, you've got your punter, you've got your long snapper. You're not far off with the roster, right? Would you like upgrades at corner, center, nose tackle? Absolutely. But what you want to be able to do is be ready to go in. So I would love to see them acquire a center, whether that's a Sean Ryan, a Connor McGovern, etc., heading into the draft. I'd love to see them get a nose tackle before they head into the draft. I'd love to see them get a corner who can come and compete before the draft. And then if you do those three things, you're able to go into the draft and really truly take best player available, which is what you want to do and not be swayed by positional need as best as you can. What am I letting go, Aaron? I'm assuming you mean let's go. Still think the Packers are going to draft a center with 52? No idea. I do think they'll take best player available. I think offensive line, if I were betting right now, I'd say corner. I think there's going to be good corners available at 52. I think that'll make a lot of sense. But defensive tackle, corner, and offensive line would be my three best guesses. But if I were guessing right now, betting right now, I would bet corner. Do the Bears just stick with their current wide receiver core? Do they try to sign Dobbs now? I don't think they'll be in the Dobbs market at all. I do think that Burden and Adunze are going to be their primary two, but I do think that they'll get one more semi-significant wide receiver, either in free agency or the draft, just to round out that room a little bit more. They don't need a ton, but they probably want one more piece, especially just because if Burden or Adunze were to go down, you are a little bit limited with the talent in that room. So I think they'll try to get one more player in a mid-tier free agent signing or somewhere in the middle of the draft. What cut aging but effective player will Green Bay ignore despite being a pretty good fit? I don't think there's been anything super crazy as of yet. Biotish, you could make an argument on, but I haven't seen many cut candidates. I have heard a little bit about, Hargrave that was released from Minnesota. He had a ton of success with Jonathan Gannon, and I have heard that maybe Gannon might be interested in a reunion there. So that could be one, but I haven't seen anything super crazy yet. That's just like oh my God, that's a perfect fit. But maybe Biotish, maybe Hargrave would be two so far. Maybe Jonathan Allen, but I don't think any of those really change the trajectory of your team all that much, if I'm being honest. I'm betting today, I think Max Crosby is going to be a Chicago Bear. I think he will be. I hate it. I don't like it, but I think it's going to be 2 firsts for like Crosby and 5th or something like that. Crosby and a fourth. 2 firsts for like a first this year, a first next year for Crosby, and like a fourth next year. That's my guess. Something like that in that range is what Chicago will give up. And I think if I were betting right now, I would bet that Max Crosby is a Chicago Bear. Well, he said that Goody is not a bad GM. Well, if you notice, all his free agent signings are because of bad drafting. Missed on Dillon, signed Jacob Savage, got McKinney, Parsons got Gary, and Lucas Van Ness. Yeah, the Lucas Van Ness Parsons, I'm assuming, is what you're going to say there. There's a level of truth to that. Absolutely. I would also say there's an extent of that that's good GMing. Of course, you would rather just get the picks right all the time. Goes without saying. But you have to be ready to pivot if you get it wrong. If Savage would have been great, they would have given that Xavier McKinney contract to Darnell Savage. Savage wasn't great, so they went out and gave the money to Xavier McKinney. If Dillon was great, you would have given that money to A.J. Dillon. He wasn't, so you gave it to Josh Jacobs instead. So you have to be willing to pivot when you get those wrong and go in a different direction. And you're not going to get your picks right all the time. We've said over and over and over, or at least I've said over and over and over, he has to do a better job with his first round picks. It's not going to be an issue again until 2028. We'll see if Goody's even GM at that point. But for now, he's going to have to get his second round picks right. But yeah, his first round picks have been an issue. They haven't got enough ROI on them. But kudos to him for recognizing that some of them didn't work out and pivoting in a different direction to guys like Micah Parsons, Josh Jacobs, Xavier McKinney, etc. If you're going to miss, then you better be able to pivot. And he's pivoted very well in those situations. What the Rams are doing, or what the Packers should have been doing during the Aaron Rodgers golden years, Ted screwed up the latter years of Aaron, or the latter years of his tenure. Now we know he was dealing with a lot of health issues. But in that case, you either need to step down or the team needs to make you step down in that situation. Doesn't mean he can't be a consultant. Doesn't mean he can't be involved. But he did not do a great job at the end of his tenure. And he was a great GM prior to that. Helped Green Bay win a Super Bowl in a pretty significant way. Drafted Aaron Rodgers. There were, signed Charles Woodson. Drafted. We talked about before the players that he drafted. He did a really great job overall. But at the end, instead of addressing needs the way that they needed to, it was a lot of Ladarius Gunters, right? And it wasn't what it needed to be. They needed to be more aggressive. And just disappointing that didn't get done, and that they were left a little bit in the lurch, and Aaron had to do so much heavy lifting on his own. Definitely a big regret of part of the Aaron Rodgers prime, for sure, that you missed out on because you weren't willing to be more aggressive during that time frame. Who of the national media who covers football is your favorite? I think Daniel Jeremiah does a really good job. I love listening to DJ. I think Mina Kimes does a wonderful job. Ben Solak is a go-to. Yeah, those are probably some I love. I like the Athletic Football Show more when it was Mays and Tice, but Mays does a really good job, and I do like Klassen as well. I think those two fit well together. But yeah, those are probably some off the top of my head that I really enjoy listening to. I'm sure there's others that I'm missing just off the top of my head that aren't coming to mind, but those are some that have a lot of my respect. Just a bold prediction, Andy. The Giants will make it back to the Super Bowl before Green Bay. They're going to build it the right way. I can feel it. I want my credit when it happens. Remember this. I just hope you're wrong, Ralph. I think the Giants are going to be a little ways away, but if they get Dart right, Scattaboo is really fun. Neighbors is really good. Abdul Carter is going to be really good. They've got a really good foundation there. But yeah, we'll see. I'll see New York in the Super Bowl, or I'll believe New York in the Super Bowl when I see it. Right now, I think Green Bay has better odds. But if Giants do things the right way, they could hit on some things that could make them very dangerous. But it's going to be very much up to Dart, Scattaboo, Neighbors, Carter, some of those young players to be really big, foundational building blocks for that team moving forward. Andy, do you think the Packers have any kind of shot at getting Trent Williams or Max Crosby? I do not. I would be very, very surprised at either. Crosby for sure, no. Williams, I'd be pretty stunned by too. I just think no. There's maybe a point 1% chance of a Trent Williams. I think there's 0% chance at Max Crosby. Also, it does sound like it's probably going to be 2 firsts for Max, and Green Bay just doesn't have 2 firsts. You know, they can only trade a 2028 first round pick. That's it. So they'd have to just trade so much, and it's just too much resources for one position, honestly. So no chance at Crosby. Very, very, very minimal chance at Trent Williams. Thank you. Any trade rumors? Go Pack Go. No trade rumors that I've seen for Green Bay so far. I have seen a lot of rumors of Max Crosby to Chicago. Sounds like Philly, Dallas, Chicago, and the Rams are in on Max Crosby. Either way, it sounds like he's going to go to an NFC contending team. Dallas would be the team you want him to go to, probably in that scenario. But yeah, I do think he ends up in the NFC and probably to a team that you're not going to want him on, unfortunately. But yeah, that's kind of the main rumor that's kind of going around right now. Andy is a hat guy. My condolences for your loss. If you're paying Gary to be mediocre and you're worried about losing a comp pick, why won't we cut Gary and pay Igbare much less to be Gary-ish? That's probably what I would do. I would probably just go in a different direction altogether. I don't feel like paying Igbare is a great idea, and I certainly don't feel like continuing to pay Rashawn Gary is a great idea. I do think they need a third defensive end, and I would be active in trying to find that guy, but I don't love either of those situations right now. I do think they need to upgrade that room in some way. It's probably one that's gone a little bit under the radar, especially with Micah being out to begin the season. That's an issue. And right now it's LVN and Baron Sorrell and Colin Oliver if you don't have Gary and Igbare back. So I do think they're going to have to do some work on that position. Oops, we just did that one, right? Yep. Let's see. Have a funny feeling they are not going to touch free agency. I think they'll touch it in some way. It's just, are they involved in the first wave or second wave, or is it a little bit later when guys don't count, against the comp pick formula, or after the draft, or guys who are released? Yeah, how involved are they is going to be the question. I do think they'll be semi-involved no matter what, but it could be a slow week next week. There's certainly a possibility of that. And we'll get a good inclination on that as to what they do to free up space ahead of next week. If Gary and Jenkins are still on the roster and they haven't done many other restructures, it's kind of all you need to know, that there's probably not a major move coming. But if all of a sudden Jenkins and Gary are gone, they restructure, some of the high-end players that they can save money with, well, then they're probably going to be in it in some way, shape, or form to get a semi-significant free agent signing. Andy, been a while since I've been able to catch a Q&A. Was curious what 1 or 2 realistic moves, whether it be free agency or the draft, would make you feel great going into the season. Connor McGovern at center would make me feel really good. I think he'd be a really good fit. Obviously, if they found a way to get Linderbaum, that would be really fun. I don't see that happening. I actually would really like Charlie Kohler as a tight end. I don't think what he's going to get and what they have available. Might sneeze 1 second. Sorry, this cold is it's killing me a little bit. 1 sec. Maybe false alarm. All right. Yeah, I don't think they're going to want to pay him for what he probably is going to go for, but I do think he'd be a fun addition to the team. Isaiah Likely is not probably a need, but he'd be a fun addition. Trying to think what else. They got to find a defensive tackle. I just hate the class overall. Knew it was coming eventually. Yeah, I'm trying to think. If they could get a Chanel, something like that, I would love at linebacker. Like if they could come out of this with like Leo Chanel and Connor McGovern, I think that would be a sneaky, like really good free agency class. Let all 6 guys walk. You still get 4 comp picks in that situation. Come away with a really good starting linebacker next to Edgerrin Cooper. You figure out your center position. And yes, you're still going to need a corner, but second round corner is probably very logical. And then you're going to have to find another nose tackle somewhere, maybe in value free agency later, or maybe later in the draft. But I'd feel pretty good about that if you could kind of get that going into free agency. Goody MK, thanks for being here, my friend. My guess on the survey regarding Matt LaFleur is that it has to do with young people feeling they aren't being played enough, and those scores dragging down the positive grades, or filling in Steve for every answer. Maybe it's that too, Dragon Scale. Either way, again, certainly worse than it was last year, and that's a bit of a concern. Get those likes in there, folks. Appreciate you, my friend. Can we hire away the physical training staff from Seattle instead of San Fran? Yeah. I just hope they're healthier this year. I hope that for every team. I hope all 32 teams are healthier this year. I hate injuries. It sucks. I wish we could turn them off. I wish we could see which team is actually best at building their team and which GM is best at building their team. But as we know, injuries are going to play a part every single year. And Seattle got pretty damn lucky with knowing not significant injuries a year ago. And Green Bay did not. I really, truly believe this. I think if Seattle was as injured as Green Bay was, and Green Bay was as healthy as Seattle was, I think Green Bay might be your Super Bowl champions. I really, truly mean that. Maybe LA. It probably comes down to the Rams and the Packers in that scenario. But I think it's between the Rams and the Packers if Seattle is as injured as Green Bay and Green Bay is as injured as Seattle. Well, it didn't work that way. Eventually, if in 3 years, if they do not at least make it to a Super Bowl, they need to take off their mask and blame has to go somewhere. At some point, it's time to clean house. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough to say Super Bowl or bust. Always, it just is. We'll see what these next 3 years look like. If it's, yeah, I don't know. What if it's 3 Super Bowl losses? Is that, it's not going to be that, but there's just a lot that goes into it. We all want the Super Bowl wins. Don't get me wrong. It's a really, really difficult conversation of what's acceptable. And if you start getting to Super Bowl is the only thing that's acceptable, man, you're going to end up firing a lot of coaches really quick if that's your level of what needs to be done. And then you end up in that cycle of being a team like the Browns or the Bears, or it's just never on the same page and is constantly firing people. I don't think you want to be that either. I don't think you want to be stuck in neutral. That's a terrible place to be too. I need to see signs of progress is I think what really needs to be shown, and in a decently significant way. If they show signs of progress and things are going and growing in the right direction, okay. I will say this: a Super Bowl would cure a lot of things, though. Super Bowl would cure a lot of things. Losing my pink hat. Say, yeah, you never want to lose the pink hat. Does Gary restructure make sense, or does that hurt future years to come? It's the only positive move to release. Yeah, so here's why a Gary restructure is interesting. A Gary restructure opens up more salary cap space this year than releasing him does. And now you have Rashawn Gary on the roster, which you may not like Rashawn Gary with how much he makes and the draft capital they put in or whatever, but make no mistake about it. Rashawn Gary on this team or Rashawn Gary off this team, the team is better with Rashawn Gary on the team. Maybe certainly not as your number 1 defensive end, probably not as your number 2. But if he's your number 3, if LVN and Parsons are your starters and Gary's your number 3, hell, even if you only play him on rundowns, because he's been a really good run defender these last couple of years, even if that's all he is, you are better with him. He's better than Barron Sorrell. He's better than Colin Oliver. You are better with him on the team than you're without him. Okay. And there's always the chance that maybe he rekindles something from a few years ago and finds another 80 pressure season. Do I think that's going to happen? No, but he has done it in the NFL. I want to reiterate again, Rashawn Gary, not a bad player. Rashawn Gary, a bad player comparatively to his contract and his draft status and everything that you've done to put him in positions to succeed. He has not lived up to any of it, especially this past year. But Rashawn Gary, better than average player. PFF graded him as such. I graded him as such. Not by much. Not much better, but an above average player who is a net positive for you. Not by much, but some. And he is better on the team than without him. However, so the way you look at it is you say, all right, now I have more money to spend and I still have Rashawn Gary on the team. So now number 3 defensive end is not as big of an issue. Awesome. Now I actually have more money to go spend and I still have Rashawn. I've filled another spot. I can do that. But yes, it does hurt you in future years. You're just borrowing from the future to pay for Rashawn Gary now. And that's a really bad idea. A really, really bad idea. So yes, the ideal scenario is that you're able to trade him and get anything in return for him. Box of popcorn, couple hot dogs, a pink hat, a Pack-A-Day Podcast shirt, packadaypodcast.com. Anything you could get would be a blessing. If you can't do that, then the next best thing is probably to cut him. What they're going to do, I think it's a true 50-50 as to whether or not it's a cut or whether it's they keep him, restructure his contract, and really, I think, make a mistake by doing so. Andy, I finally found out where they sell Luigi's Pizza on me. I will say you were correct about that fresh Wisconsin mozzarella and robust tomato sauce. Let's go, Engine. It's awesome. Go check it out. Luigi'sPizza.com. My dream offseason, Connor McGovern, Shaheed/Sky Moore, and Devin Lloyd. Think that would be perfect going into the draft. Landon, not going to happen. Maybe McGovern, maybe Sky Moore, and maybe, one other, kind of value free agent. But, I do think they're going to go center hunting. I really do. I don't think Devin Lloyd's going to be in their plans. He's going to go around 20 mil per year. He's going to be well outside of their range. So that would be a good start, but I think you're going to have to go a little bit cheaper at linebacker than what Devin Lloyd's going to come in at. Andy, welcome back. Would you be in on signing Biadasz? Just depends on how much. I would like McGovern more. I think he makes a little bit more sense, but I wouldn't be opposed to Biadasz. I do think he would be a solid center. I think you could help. It doesn't move the needle a ton, but I think he'd be an upgrade from certainly what Elton and Sean Ryan brought to the table at center a year ago. So I could be for it. It's things are weird sometimes because, when I hear, do you want Tyler Biadasz to be your starting center in Green Bay? I'm like, it's fine. Not really. And then I see that Chicago is interested in signing Tyler Biadasz. I'm like, damn it. That's such a good signing. Of course they would sign Tyler Biadasz. I don't know why your mind plays tricks. I do think he's a better fit for Ben Johnson's system than LaFleur. So maybe that's a piece of it, but it is weird how you're like, I don't want the Bears to get Biadasz. And then you're like, well, do you want the Packers to get Biadasz? I'm like, yeah, it's fine. But yeah, it's just weird sometimes like that. Maybe it's just me. You should try to get Wendell Fajeda on sometime this offseason. No, John, he does awesome work. Wendell is amazing. Go follow Wendell if you're not already. I've had him on the radio show a bunch. Very, very smart. We'll definitely get him on the pod at some point. But yeah, I love Wendell. One of the most underrated people covering the Packers. He does absolutely fantastic work. What do you think about Jonnu Smith signing street free agent? No comp pick impact. We need to upgrade 10 and 2 with someone who can block a little. Yeah, I could be wrong. I don't think Jonnu's a great blocker. He's a little bit undersized too, I think. Yeah, he's not a great blocker, at least per PFF grades. 6'3", 248. He's more of a receiving tight end. I like Jonnu Smith. I don't think he's what Green Bay needs right now, John. Andy, do you ever play around with different offseason GM simulator websites like Stick to the Model or PFN? If so, have you found one more realistic than others? I haven't, just because I usually build it on my own. When I do the offseason, simulation and things like that, I go through and I make sure I dot my I's and cross my T's and have the numbers correct and everything. So I don't feel ever comfortable putting that in anybody else's hands, just because there's so much really minute minutia. That's a double whatever, but there's so much minutia that goes into it that I want to dot my I's and cross my T's with it. So I've not played with those simply because I kind of put together my own thing. With the Jonathan Gannon hire, I was like John Gruden for a second. I'm like, what? Who hired John Gruden? What young guys are you looking for to have a breakout year or a step in the right direction that says he's going to be a star in our defense? This is something that's changed with me a little bit. Unrivaled Chaos. I don't really believe most players are going to break out anymore. I believe that you pretty much get the gist of who they are pretty quickly. And on a rare occasion, you see somebody break out in a significant way, usually just because they get more opportunity. For example, I think Matthew Golden's going to have a much better opportunity to break out just because he's going to get a lot more opportunity. He's somebody that I think we saw the star-making ability when he got opportunity. He just didn't get a ton of it. I think he's going to get a lot more moving forward. So I could see a legitimate breakout for him. I know that's on the offensive side, but you get my point. Could Jordan Morgan or Anthony Belton, full-time at left tackle for Morgan, full-time at guard for Belton, could they improve, by getting more consistent time at one spot? Sure, absolutely. Could somebody like Tyron Hopper, we haven't seen much, be better than expected? Sure. But there's not a ton that I'm just all of a sudden expecting, oh my God, can you believe how good this player is going to be? The players that I just named, and specifically Golden, are the ones that I'm really kind of keeping an eye out for. I bet a lot of the other players are pretty similar to what we've seen so far. More often than not, that's the case. It's really fun in the offseason to dream of a player who's going to take a big jump, but then we get to the season and far more often than not, they're just kind of the same player that we've seen in years prior. Not always, but it tends to be that way a little bit more. Bisaccia really screwed the Packers. Leaving is one thing, but the timing was terrible. Many fans were cheering the poor special teams play and want blood for, but don't think that will actually improve things. It was definitely bad timing. Definitely brutal timing for Bisaccia to do that at that point in time. Not sure if Acorn will be good or bad, but the timing didn't help. I can only conclude Rich didn't like the resources he was being given, but if so, he should have decided to leave sooner. Yeah, I don't know why it took him so long. Make that decision sooner and do what you need to do. And it's fine to leave, but to do it once every other special teams coordinator had been filled is a pretty crappy situation. And we know now it's not a health thing, right? He's going to coach at Clemson. So the fact that he took that long is pretty crappy from Rich Bisaccia. Too bad Sweat got traded when you were off. I know. Maybe it's better because I would have been maybe a little bit more pissed when it happened. They got good value in Jermaine Johnson. That's a pretty fair swap of young players still on rookie deals. One's both fit better in their new homes, I think. So I think it was probably a better swap, but man, I would have loved Sweat in Green Bay. I think he would have been a really fun fit. Yeah, special teams hire I'm going to go into for tomorrow's episode unless we get some sort of breaking news. I'll break it down in great detail for tomorrow. Andy, about the O-line debacle, did they ever ask Jenkins to move to center, do you think? And do other teams platoon linemen? We seem clueless coaching that group. Love your work, man. I appreciate you, my friend. It did seem like there were conversations with Jenkins about moving to center. It never seemed like he was upset about moving to center. It seemed like he was upset about his pay and not wanting to be in the situation he's in right now where he has got no leverage whatsoever and Green Bay is just going to cut him on their own terms. Like, that's what he wanted to avoid. And he wanted to get paid more money. I don't think he ever actually had an issue with playing center. And that's what he said all along as well. But I do think they had those conversations with him. Other teams do platoon linemen from time to time. Green Bay does it more. I think they've done some really cool, unique, and fun and good stuff overall. I don't think last year went well in any way, shape, or form. And I think it started going bad by playing players really not in their ideal positions. Benefit of hindsight, but Ryan was better at center. I'd be willing to bet you Jenkins was better at guard. They started, Belton at tackle the entire offseason. He was better at guard. They put Morgan at guard the entire offseason. He was better at tackle. I just think they mismanaged some of that for sure. Chris Brooks, I would say, is definitely better than Patrick Taylor was. Appreciate the super chat, my friend. But yes, I like Chris Brooks a decent amount better. Given early draft work, I won't hold you to it, but what positions would you like to attack in the draft versus free agent release market? Yeah, I went over that a little bit already, but I just always want to fill as many spots in free agency before you get to the draft. But I would probably attack center because I think it's a good free agent class. Linebacker because I think it's a good free agent class. I would probably attack those two a little bit more in free agency. Try to attack corner and defensive tackle a little bit more in the draft. I think that probably makes a little bit more sense. Is there any truth to the rumor that Green Bay reached out to Brandon Aubrey's agent? If true, would he be a big enough asset to spend on while they likely forego a need at a key position? So a couple things here. I don't know if that is true or not. I know Easton Butler reported that he's really, really good at being in tune with this stuff. A lot of the stuff that he has said over the years has come true and come to fruition, including Micah last year. So he seems to be very, very well connected. I would take what he says very seriously. I certainly do. As far as reaching out to Aubrey's agent, what I will say is that would be illegal tampering at this point in time if they did that. Now, every team is doing it, but just a slight note there. The other thing is that Aubrey's a restricted free agent. Even if Dallas gave a right of first refusal, Dallas will match any offer, would be my guess. And they will not give a right of first refusal. They will probably put a high-end draft pick compensation on him, which would probably be like a second-round pick for Aubrey, or maybe even higher. And I don't think Green Bay is going to do that. They're not going to give up a draft pick plus a huge contract for a kicker. So I don't expect it. If they were in on Aubrey, it would probably be via trade with Dallas. And I don't see that happening either. Although Dallas is weird. You never quite know. Would an automatic kicker give us enough while keeping our roster mostly the same? I don't believe there's anything like an automatic kicker. And, all of a sudden a kicker gets in his head, gets the yips, whatever it might be, doesn't kick as well outside. And all of a sudden you spent a major pick and a major contract for a kicker that can't make kicks, you have to be really careful with that position. That position can have high highs and low lows very, very quickly. You just never know. I have started studying draft prospects. If so, do you go position by position, or I do usually start at one, try to get through as many as I can? Not the most efficient way of doing it from a Packers standpoint this year, but I try to do it that way pretty much every single year and try to get through as many as I can. We'll be ramping up very aggressively here over the next couple of days. Feels like the Packers and Bears are two franchises heading in different directions, especially if the Bears get Crosby and if Micah misses at least the first 4 weeks. Where can Green Bay regain momentum? First of all, I just think the North is going to be a bloodbath again. I bet Minnesota gets Kyler Murray. I bet Chicago gets Max Crosby. And I just think it's going to be a nightmare of a division. But Chicago had definitely some luck on their side last year. Some very close wins, some field goal luck, some turnover luck. They had a lot of things going their way that if any of that regresses to the mean, they're going to take a step back even with Max Crosby. But Max Crosby would be a huge addition for them. Green Bay can get a lot better just on injury health. Just having Christian Watson and Jaden Reed for the full year, Tucker Kraft, Devontae Wyatt, Zach Tom, Micah Parsons, you guys know the names, but if they can get healthy, that's going to be huge for them. And that's how they can upgrade their roster in a significant way. Not to mention Matthew Golden being better, maybe some of the young offensive linemen like Morgan and Belton being better. Like Green Bay's got a lot of opportunity to improve. I do think they'll add at least one, pretty solid free agent signing, and they're still going to add some draft picks as well. Green Bay's going to find a way to get better. Plus, they have a new coordinator on defense and special teams, and that can add a new flair to things as well. I think Green Bay still has an opportunity to take a jump this year. Thompson made a lot of great draft picks, but he also got way too conservative towards the end in extending guys and signing free agents. Great overall, though. Yeah, there was definitely like two different Teds. The early and middle Ted, and then the late Ted was definitely a bit different. Just a fun question. Who is hated by fans more? Demarius Randall, Ladarius Gunter, or Kevin King? I would say King, I think. They traded Randall early enough that it didn't last long enough. And I think Gunter, at least I think fans should have some respect for the fact that the guy was an undrafted free agent that bumped up over Demarius Randall and Quentin Rollins and battled his ass off despite having no right to be a number 1 corner. He shouldn't be a number 3 corner. Like he was supposed to be a number 4, 5, or 6 corner. And here he battled and gave everything he could to go up against some really difficult matchups. And it wasn't his fault that he had to be put in that position. I think people at least should respect that more. I would say Kevin King is probably the most hated of that group. Just jump. So sorry if you already talked about it, but any interest in Becton for depth? No interest in Becton. He wasn't bad last year. He was god awful last year. And unless you have Stoutland coming to Green Bay, who was the only person who was able to get anything out of him, I would stay far, far away from Mekhi Becton. There's a lot of other issues there too. No interest at all. Dominique Orange is my draft crush. His tape kind of reminds me of BJ Raji coming out of BC. Fun defensive tackle. Need to dig into him a little bit more, but I know a lot of people have brought him up as well as a potential draft pick for Green Bay, but could be gone by 52 as well. You never quite know. And if so, that could be off the table also. Who's the worst Packers first round pick in your fandom? Let me think. All right. Certainly wasn't Golden. Probably the ones I was most upset about when they happened were Rashawn Gary and Jordan Morgan. Trying to think if there was anyone else. Demarius Randall was another. I did not like HaHa Clinton Dix. But Dix, I thought, would at least get to a level of solid play. So he wasn't who I wanted. Everyone loved him, and I didn't think he was going to be good. And then he had a couple good years and then got bad really fast. The most upset I was at time of pick were Nick Barnett, because I really wanted Boss Bailey. Just missed on that. It was 2003. I was young and stupid. That was probably one of the ones I was most upset by. And then I would say Demarius Randall, Jordan Morgan, and Rashawn Gary at time of pick were the ones that I was most visibly disappointed in. Yeah, Ahmad Carroll is a good one. I didn't have a huge take on him at the time, if I'm being honest. I didn't know. I wasn't as nerdy about it, I think, that year. Early on in my life, there were certain years in the draft where I wasn't quite as nerdy about it. But yeah, I didn't have a huge take on Carroll at the time. Carroll I was fine with. it didn't work out. I still think if Harold could have stayed healthy, it would have been a little bit more interesting as to whether or not he would have been a good player or not. He definitely got overdrafted, but yeah, you can never have enough, 300 plus pound agile defensive lineman. I thought at worst he would have been a really good rotational defensive tackle, and then injuries just killed his career. With the added pressure on Matt LaFleur this season, do you see him doing anything different for the season as far as time management, added special teams attention, etc.? He seems too stuck in his ways. I think we'll get some change-ups. What those are, I don't know. Obviously he's got new coordinators on defensive and special teams. There's no Rich Bisaccia, assistant head coach. I think there'll be some changes. What those are, TBD. But I don't think it's going to be exactly the same. And I do think Matt's going to kind of look internally and figure out how he can be better and how they can make things better for the team this offseason. I think there seems to be some level of that. Just even with Goody saying, hey, we got to get back to the basics. I think there's going to be some changes for this team. All right, friends, I do have to get out of here. We hit through everyone's questions right at about the hour mark, so that worked out perfect. I'll be back right away tomorrow for happy hour, 3 p.m. Central, same time, same place. So I will see you guys there. Enjoy your evening. Maybe we'll get some more news between now and tomorrow. It's a great time of year for breaking news every given moment. Those dopamine hits every single time a new Schefter or Rappaport tweet comes out is always awesome. But enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you guys tomorrow. And until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.